Hello and welcome to the third video in our Causal for Finance series. If you're an early stage startup or small business using QuickBooks or Xero, then this series is for you. We're going to show you how to build and automate all of your core financial reporting, planning, and budgeting processes in Causal. In the first two videos, we set up a custom P&L connected to your accounting system, as well as a detailed headcount model connected to your HR system. In this video, we're going to be setting up a detailed revenue forecast. This is going to be based on a B2B SaaS business, but no matter what your business model is, the same principles that you'll be learning in this video can be applied to your own business, and we have templates that you can use for different business models as well. Let's dive in. So I'm on my Causal home screen, I've got my financial model, I've got my headcount plan. I'm now going to click on this new model button, and I'm going to click from template. We've got a bunch of templates for different use cases and different businesses. And in this case, we're just going to use the first template in the list. It's the B2B SaaS revenue model. So once we've cloned the template, we should end up with something like this. Once again, we have the charts on the right-hand side showing some of the key results of this model, and we'll dive into those in a sec. We're going to hide those charts to give us a little bit more room. We have the core spreadsheet where we have the assumptions and calculations. And in this case, we don't have any data connected to this model, and we don't have any categories yet. So what I'm going to do for now is just hide the data column, since we're not going to be working with data in this model. And to do that, I'll just click on the data button up here, and this just gives us a bit more space to play with. Now I'll start by walking through the different assumptions and the formulas of this model so that you understand how they work. And then what we're going to be doing is customizing the model by adding some extra detail. We're going to add different products into this model. So right now, this model just assumes that you are a B2B SaaS business and you have a single product that you sell to your customers. The way the model is set up is that there are two different channels through which you acquire leads. You acquire some leads inbound that come in sort of organically and book a meeting with you, and you do some outbound messaging to acquire other leads via outbound, and that also turns into meetings booked. So we have assumptions for each of these channels in the inbound group and the outbound group. We assume that in the start of our model, we have 100 inbound leads coming in per month. We assume that it grows by 3% per month, and then we assume that 5% of inbound leads end up booking a meeting with us. Now for the outbound channel, we assume that we send 1,000 outbound messages per month, and that 2% of those convert into meetings. So you'll notice we're not assuming that this grows over time. This is just a flat 1,000 messages per month that we send. Now once a meeting is booked, we have a meeting to demo conversion rate of 50%. So 50% of meetings turn into demos. We then have a 50% conversion rate from demo to closed won. So 50% of demos actually become customers. Our sales cycle takes 2 months from start to finish. Our ACV, our average contract value, is 15K. Our contract length is 12 months, and 10% of our customers churn on renewal. So these are the core assumptions of our model. If you have a B2B SaaS business, none of this should sound too crazy so far. Let's hide the input section and take a look at some of the calculations that we're doing. The next section is called the sales funnel. In this section, all we're doing is figuring out the number of demos that we are doing each month. And so if we expand the formula column to see this in a bit more detail, we can see that demos come from meetings booked based on the meeting to demo conversion rate. Meetings booked come from a mixture of outbound meetings booked plus inbound meetings booked. The outbound meetings booked is simply the outbound messages that we've sent multiplied by the outbound to meeting booked conversion rate. And the inbound meetings that we've booked is the number of inbound leads multiplied by that conversion rate as well. Now you'll recall that we had a growth rate for our inbound leads. So these were growing each month. And you'll see in the formula column for inbound leads, Causal's telling us that there's actually 2 formulas for this variable. If we're in a situation where there's multiple formulas for a variable, the way we can find out where these formulas are and what they are is by looking at the cells for each month on the right-hand side. Any cell with a little F symbol, a formula symbol, has a formula that starts in that cell. And so we have an F symbol here for January. And so you'll see that for January, the formula is equal to the inbound leads initial assumption from our input section. We also have an F symbol in February. And if we look into February, we'll see that The formula here looks at the previous month's inbound leads and multiplies it by the growth rate. And so these are the two formulas in our model. You can double click to see the period over which this applies. But we have one formula for January and one formula for the rest of the model. So that's how the sales funnel is working, and we're ending up with a total number of demos booked. All right, so we've walked through the different inputs of our model. We've gone through the sales funnel, which takes the inbound leads, the outbound leads, works out the number of demos that we're doing. And now we're on to the customer build. This section of the model will tell us how many new customers we're having each month, how many customers are churning, all of those kind of different customer types. And so the first calculation we've got here is for our new customers. Now, if you recall from the assumptions, what we said was that once someone does a demo with us, we then have a certain percentage of those people converting into customers. And so what our calculation for new customers does is that it looks at a bunch of demos, and a certain percentage of those, the demo to closed won percentage, that percentage get converted into actual customers. Now the question is, which set of demos should we look at to understand how many customers are converting this month? Now you'll recall that we said that we actually had a sales cycle of 2 months. If we go into our input section, you'll see we have this assumption for sales cycle, which is 2 months. So it takes 2 months from first talking to a prospect and converting them into a customer. So for example, if we talk to someone and do the demo in January, it'll take 2 months for them to actually become a customer. There'll be probably some follow-up calls, some paperwork, maybe some more demos. And so if we're looking at the number of customers that we're going to be getting on board today, that actually corresponds to demos that we were doing not in the current month, but actually 2 months ago. So if we're in November today, the people that will be coming on as customers in November actually did demos with us 2 months ago in September. And so to understand the new customers we're bringing on in the current month, what we actually need to do is look back a couple of months to see how many demos did we do in September, and then a certain percentage of those demos are going to convert into new customers. We're talking about this in terms of 2 months ago. What is this T minus sales cycle, right? If we click on this, you can see that in formulas in Causal, you can reference all sorts of different points in time. You can reference multiple points in time. And there's also this custom button here. If we click on the custom button, we can see what's going on. Now, Causal's syntax for referencing different points in time depends on this T variable. Now, T just refers to the current place that we are in the model. So in April, T will refer to April. In May, T will refer to May, and so on. So T is kind of dynamic depending on which month the calculation is being done in. And then our syntax basically lets us look forward or back by doing T minus, 1, 2, 3, or T plus 1, 2, 3. And so if we want to look back 1 month, we do T minus 1. If we want to look back 2 months, we do T minus 2. In this case, we don't want to hard code the number of months. We don't want to say T minus 1 or T minus 2. We want to say, hey, we've got this sales cycle variable. That variable might change. It might change over time. It might be, we might just change it in different scenarios and so on. We want to look at that variable and do T minus that. And so that's exactly what's going on here. We're basically looking back by a number of months that is equal to the sales cycle variable that we've already created. And so just to kind of round this off, what the new customers formula is doing is that it's looking at demos a few months ago, depending on the sales cycle, and it's converting a certain percentage of those into closed won customers based on the conversion rate, which is also in the input section. Finally, we're also just rounding this up. You can't have 0.5 of a customer, and so we're just rounding this to end up with whole numbers here. And so that's how we're calculating our new customers. Let's now jump to our customers up for renewal. Let's try and understand how we're calculating our customers up for renewal. Now, if we take a look at the formula here, you'll see there's 2 parts to this. There's one part that involves new customers a certain length of time ago, and there's another part that involves renewed customers a certain length of time ago. Now, we now understand what T minus contract length means. It basically means, hey, if the contract length is 12 months, look back 12 months. If the contract length is 6 months, look back 6 months. And so in this case, our contract length is currently 12 months. So if we think about which customers are going to be up for renewal this month, it's going to be customers that either signed up 12 months ago or renewed 12 months ago, because every 12 months, the contracts will be up for renewal. And so, just as an example, contract length is 12 months. What we would do is we would look at new customers from 12 months ago. and those people will be up for renewal. And then we'd look at renewed customers from 12 months ago as well. So these could be customers that signed up 24 months ago. So 24 months ago, they were a new customer, 12 months ago, they renewed, and now they are up for renewal. And so we need to consider both of these two different buckets when we're looking at customers up for renewal. Now, once we've got our customers up for renewal, we can calculate our churned customers. And here, all we're doing is we're taking our number of customers up for renewal and we're multiplying it by the churn rate. So the way we're interpreting this churn rate number of 10% is that we're saying, look, if the churn rate is 10%, then 10% of customers that are up for renewal end up churning. They end up not renewing. And so all this is doing is it's looking at how many people can renew and saying that, okay, look, a certain percentage of those people that don't renew, they end up churning. Now, there's a couple of small things we're doing here as well. We're rounding it once again. We don't want to end up with fractions of customers. And finally, we're just making this whole number negative just so that we can understand churn customer numbers as negative and positive numbers as sort of actual customers. And it kind of simplifies a lot of the other calculations and visualizations down the line. So you'll see the churn, -1 means we had one churn customer in that month, for example. I think if we jump ahead, -2 means we had 2 churn customers in that month. So we've now walked through the new customers, the customers up for renewal, and the churned customers. The renewed customers is very simple. We're saying, hey, look, who was up for renewal? Let's subtract the churned people, and anyone who is up for renewal and didn't churn must have renewed. And so that's exactly what we're doing here. We're taking the customers up for renewal, we're adding the churned customers. Importantly, we're adding this because churn customers is already negative. And so all of our calculations involving churn customers, we'll just add them on. And that'll give us our renewed customers. And finally, our total customers, you'll see that there's actually 2 formulas here. If you remember the previous video, there are sometimes when we have 2 formulas. In the first month, we are looking at the existing number of customers and accounting for churn and accounting for new customers. And from month 2 onwards, we're looking at the total number of customers in the previous month, accounting for churn and accounting for new customers. So that's very straightforward. And finally, existing customers will just tell us, hey, how many customers did we already have? The difference between existing customers and renewed customers is that, if you're 4 months, if you're 4 months into a 12-month contract, you won't have renewed in that month, but you will already be an existing customer. And so that's what that tells us. So that is our full customer build. These are kind of all the different buckets of customers that we'd consider in a SaaS business. Let's now move on to the revenue build. This is where the formulas get a lot easier. We've already done all the hard work. We've figured out these different buckets. And all we're doing now in the revenue build is we're saying, hey, look at each bucket and multiply it by the ACV, the annual contract value, or sometimes the average contract value. And so this is telling us how much new ARR is coming in, how much is churning, how much is renewing. So very straightforward here. We've already done the hard work in the customer build. And finally, we've got a couple of calculations for our revenue. So in this case, this is obviously a big simplification, but to understand our revenue in the current month, we're just taking our ARR and dividing it by 12. Revenue is kind of a monthly thing. And then to work out our growth rate, we're looking at the total ARR in this month divided by the total ARR in the previous month -1. This will give us the growth rate. This is just math. And sometimes total ARR in the previous month might be 0. And again, just when it comes to the maths here, you can't divide by 0, you'll end up with an error. And so we just need to account for that. And we've got this if error function that is just making sure that, hey, if there is an error, just write blank. We don't want the whole model erroring out. So we've now run through all of the different calculations in this model, from the inputs to the sales funnel to the customer build to the revenue build, and finally the outputs. And in the dashboard, you can poke around and see what these different charts and tables are doing. But broadly, it's just a representation of the different calculations that we've run through. So we're happy with the calculations now. That should all make sense. I'd suggest spending a few minutes just going through customizing the assumptions. If you don't do outbound, for example, you can delete these variables. You can then just fix the formulas and delete what you don't need. And obviously the numbers are going to be different for your business, so definitely go through and customize those as well. Now the big customization that I want to make here before we link this into the P&L is to actually add different product lines. right now we're just assuming that all of our customers pay us 15K, all of our customers have the same sales cycle, they all have the same conversion rates and so on. But this might not be true for your business. You might have an enterprise product that's a higher price, longer sales cycle, different conversion rates. You might have a more high velocity SMB product where the contracts are smaller. Maybe they're month to month rather than 12-month contracts and so on. Now, how would we go about doing this? If we were back in Excel or back in Google Sheets, what we'd probably have to do is go through, make a copy of all of our assumptions, all of our calculations, duplicate it a couple of times, change the numbers for the new products and so on, and then we'll have 3 copies of everything. The good thing about Causal is that we can avoid all of that duplication by working with the categories feature. Now, from the previous video about headcount modeling, you'll already be a little bit familiar with categories, but we're going to use them in a slightly different way here. So suppose that instead of just having one product, we've actually got 3 products in our business. We've got a pro product, a business product, and an enterprise product, and all of these products have different price points. What we're going to do is create a category for our 3 products. So we'll click on the plus button here on the sidebar, and we'll click on new category, and we'll give it a name. We'll call it product. Great, so we now have a product category. Causal's automatically created a couple of example products, but we're going to rename this to Pro. We'll call this one Business, and we'll call the third one Enterprise. So we now have this list of 3 products in our Causal account. What we can now do is apply this product breakdown to the different assumptions of our model. So the most obvious assumption that's going to depend on the product is our ACV. And so if we hover over the row for ACV and navigate to the categories button and click on it, you'll see that we see a little checkbox here. And if we just check the product checkbox, you'll now see that we have ACV broken down into Pro, Business, and Enterprise, and we can set different ACVs for each one. So maybe Pro is 5K, pretty cheap. Maybe Business is 15K, and maybe Enterprise is 50K. So these are the different price points of our product. You'll notice that Causal is trying to summarize our ACV by adding up all of the different values to get 70K as a total. This doesn't really make sense. We wouldn't really think about adding the different ACVs together. And so if we right click and then go on aggregation function and category aggregation, we can see that actually we can tell Causal how to summarize those 3 into a single line. It's not going to really affect the sort of calculations in our model. The calculations are going to be done at the product level individually. And so in this case, maybe we just want to tell Causal, just don't bother trying to aggregate this. It doesn't really make sense to try and summarize that. And so now we have 3 different ACVs. Now, obviously, a few other assumptions are going to be different as well. We're going to have different sales cycles. We're going to have different contract lengths. And so, we could go through, maybe for now, I'll just go through and change the contract length. So we can apply the product category in the same way. Maybe our Pro product is month to month. Maybe our business product is quarterly, so every 3 months. And then maybe our enterprise product is every 12 months they're up for renewal. Similarly, as before, we're going to remove the category aggregation. It doesn't really make sense to try and summarize these 3 things into a single number. And maybe finally, we will just add some of these assumptions to our inbound and outbound channels. And so for outbound messages, what we can say actually is that, look, we're only doing outbound for our enterprise product. So we'll set that to 0 for our non-enterprise products. And then maybe for inbound, maybe we get a different number of leads for each. Maybe we have more Pro, and then maybe we have 25 business and maybe 5 inbound enterprise leads, and we're doing a bunch of outbound to try and get more of those. And so what we've done is we've created this list of 3 products. We've then applied that breakdown to some of the different assumptions of our model. And now let's take a look at how our calculations are looking. If we scroll down, you'll see that now all of the different calculations in our model, we can actually expand out. And if I give a bit more room here, we can expand out these calculations, and we can see that Causal is doing the calculations separately for each product and summarizing it by adding them up into a total. We didn't have to change any formulas here. We didn't have to restructure the model manually, add different rows, add any columns. Causal is automatically figuring out the number of demos we're doing in each segment, Downstream, it's automatically figuring out the number of new customers we're getting on board across the different segments, and our ARR and our revenue across the different segments as well. And so it's really that simple to add an extra sort of dimension or an extra category in our causal model. All we did was apply it to a few of the assumptions, and the rest of the calculations automatically take that into account. Now, if we go into the dashboard, we'll see that in our charts and tables, we can see all of the different products separately. And so you'll see on this chart, we have different lines for the different products. We have sort of stacked bar chart for the different pieces there as well. And if you click on the edit button, you can customize what is shown here. If you don't want to see the product breakdowns, we can remove it from this chart like this. You could instead maybe add a drop down to switch between the different products. And so if you go on filters, you can add a product filter, and that'll create this drop down that lets you switch between the 3 different products, and you can understand the dynamics of each one. And so they're all a little bit different. Similarly, in our charts and tables, maybe in the ARR breakdown, we want to see that for each product separately. If we click on the edit button, what we can do is add separate rows for each product. So we can click here, add product into the rows, and we hover over this. We can even add a total row. And so now we'll see that new, churn, renewed, and total ARR are broken down by each of the different products that we've got. So that's how you can customize your charts and tables to show these different category breakdowns that you have in your model. So we've used our template, we've customized it by adding a few more products. Let's now apply the revenue forecast from this model into our P&L, so that our P&L forecasts are using this really detailed model that we've built out, rather than a very high level sort of assumption just for our future revenue. And so just as in the previous video, we can click here, we can select the financial model to link it in. So now this, all 3 of these models are linked. We have this revenue model, we have the financial model, and we've got the headcount model. We can go into our financial model. We can find our revenue line, so SaaS subscriptions. This is kind of the key revenue line in here. We'll just delete the previous formula. And if we now type in revenue, you'll see that we can reference something from a linked model. And in here, we can now search for revenue, and we will select it. As with total payroll costs, this is showing up in blue to show that this is coming from a different model. And if we hit enter, Causal will now use the revenue numbers from our revenue model. And so you'll see, we have the historicals going up to here. We have a really big jump when it starts to use our revenue model. Obviously, we're just using example numbers. Hopefully, if you've modeled out your revenue more accurately, then you won't see such a massive change here. It'll be a realistic continuation of your revenue from your data source. So we now have our P&L connected to our headcount model for detailed payroll forecasts and our revenue model for detailed revenue forecasts. See you in the next video.